Welcome to Rethinking Your Value, Pricing, and Service in a post-DOL fiduciary rule world. My name is Kirk Hewlett, and I head the Ladenburg-Thalmann Practice Management Team. The mission of the Ladenburg-Thalmann Practice Management Team is to help advisors like you own and manage a more successful and efficient and profitable advisory practice. The objective of this session today is to provide you advice and guidance on how the DOL fiduciary rule will impact your business strategy and your business model. Let's start with some basic takeaways from the rule. What we know is advisors are going to have to be much more concise, precise, specific, and purposeful in their value and pricing proposition. So when I say value proposition, what do I mean by that? Well, your value proposition is the operating system for your business. It aids you in running your business as efficiently as possible and to maximize the potential rewards from the business. It allows you to have clarity about the type of client that you serve, clarity in the type of services that you provide to that client, and it allows you to make strategic decisions to make your pricing purposeful so that your pricing is capturing as much value as you can from the services that you offer. A truism of business and a truism of consumer psychology is that value delivered and price paid are always linked. And sometimes I think that's missed in the draft of the Department of Labor fiduciary rule. The rule talks a lot about reasonable compensation. It's a core part of the rule. Well, reasonableness of cost is largely determined by the value delivered. And if you change the value, you can change what is reasonable to charge for that value. We do believe, going forward in this post-fiduciary rule world, that value for an advisor, the value of an advisor, is going to be delivered in the form of advice, most likely behavioral advice, comprehensive financial planning advice, and investment management advice. Now, in the absence of perceived value, that is, value as perceived by the client, price becomes the deciding factor for the client. That's why you want to emphasize value, have that concise and specific and direct understanding, description, and presentation of your value. I also believe that in the absence of true demonstrated value, that's where it's difficult to make a best interest case about your service to clients and a reasonable compensation case about your relationship with clients. So the practice of the future in a post-fiduciary rule world is a financial services practice that provides comprehensive planning and behavioral coaching, is fully transparent in the fees charged and the services provided, utilizes technology to serve more clients and assets, because we can expect there may be some margin compression in this business. To maintain the earnings that you make now, you're going to likely have to serve more clients and assets, and you have to do that in the most efficient way possible. The practice of the future has an advisor who's conducting extensive client discovery and doing meticulous documentation of investment recommendations and the rationale behind those recommendations, serves a multi-generational client base. It won't be enough for advisors just to depend on working with pre-retiree baby boomers and the newly retired anymore. That to have a robust client base that will make your practice sustainable for the future, you may be needing to starting to work with those Gen X clients, those millennial clients. And finally, of course, the practice of the future and the advisor of the future is one who always acts in the best interests of his or her clients. So, other implications of this fiduciary rule that are important for your business strategy and your business model. The fiduciary rule will affect every advisor and every business model. There's some assumptions I've heard from advisors that because my business is largely on advisory, is largely already fee-based, that it's not going to impact my business. That's not the case. I think about every business model in our business is affected by this rule. That your clients are really not aware of this new fiduciary rule, That may be the case today. That will change. There will be significant talk in the consumer press about this rule. Recently, John Oliver, the comedian on HBO, did a segment on the rule. Sure, it got a few million viewers the first time it was on the air, but it went viral and tens of millions of people saw it after that. He probably got more attention for the rule than the Department of Labor itself. So your clients are going to hear about these things. You have to be prepared to educate them about what the rule means. You're going to need to build a very effective and efficient system to gather client data and document investment recommendations. You're going to have to really describe in detail to your supervision department, your compliance department, what is the rationale for your investment recommendations? And that's going to be relying on gathering some more and deeper client data so you can construct that rationale. And so you're going to have efficient and effective ways in your business to do that. You're going to need to define the type of relationships you have with your clients. That is, the services you provide, how you are communicating with them and how frequently, how you're monitoring their accounts and their investment performance. You're going to need to define the level of risk associated with client relationships. This new rule does change the risk profile of any retirement or qualified monies that you're working with. And finally, you really have to define the service that you provide by segment. You will need to treat all segments of clients well and fairly and in a best interest standard, but you will also need to treat them differently in terms of services provided, in terms of the pricing models that are offered to them. You're going to really have to think about your clients in these different segments and handling them in different ways. So we've identified 6 steps that you can take to start planning and preparing for the post-fiduciary rule world. Those include understanding the rule, conducting a whole book analysis, preparing your service matrix, ensuring you have price transparency, preparing a fiduciary positioning statement, and updating your client-facing materials. So step 1 is to educate yourself about the fiduciary rule. Ladenburg Thalmann has committed significant resources to analyzing and responding to the rule, and your Ladenburg affiliated broker-dealer should be your primary source of information about the rule. They are committed to keeping you up to date as information is released and as decisions are made. Be cautious about news media summaries, opinions, and commentary. It's been our experience that often those are inaccurate or have an axe to grind or are biased and may not be giving you all or the best information about the rule. Depend on your broker-dealer to do that. So this presentation isn't about giving you the basics of the rule, but there are a few things to cover to sort of understand a few of our recommendations. So under this rule, the fiduciary rule, non-level compensation is considered prohibited for retirement money unless there's an exemption. So non-level compensation includes upfront commissions, all 12B1 fees, trails, revenue sharing, those sorts of things. Now, you can receive those on qualified accounts if you engage with your client on what's called a best interest contract exemption, where you sign an actual contract with your client. And that contract allows you to receive that non-level compensation in consideration for agreeing to only accept reasonable compensation, to be transparent in the fees charged, and that you will always act in the best interest of your clients. This BICE, as it's the acronym Best Interest Contract Exemption, this BICE is not a disclosure. It is an actual contract that changes the risk profile of that client relationship. So previously, most client relationships were covered under an arbitration clause if there was a dispute that went to mandatory arbitration. Now, if clients are covered under a BICE contract, they can sue the advisor for failing to fulfill their contractual obligations. It also makes it easier for clients to group together under a class action lawsuit. So again, that does change the nature of the risk relationship with a client. Step 2, conduct a whole book analysis. So use reports from your broker-dealer systems or perhaps from your portfolio management systems to analyze your qualified and non-qualified accounts. Put those into 2 separate buckets. because your qualified accounts are impacted by the rule, your non-qualified accounts are not. Next, separate your qualified accounts by discretionary versus non-discretionary accounts. Those would be the accounts that are in an advisory account. Discretionary includes when an advisor or an affiliate, such as Ladenburg Thalmann Asset Management, has discretion. This does not include third-party money managers under the rule. Next, separate your non-discretionary accounts by commission-based versus fee-based. Now, the reason we're doing that is, under the rule, discretionary advisory accounts cannot receive a best interest contract exemption, and they must always offer level fee pricing. So as you can see, level compensation is required for a discretionary account. Bias is not permitted, but for non-discretionary accounts, whether they're advisory or commissionable, variable and level fee compensation can be offered. Also, as part of your whole book analysis, have a good idea of how much revenue you're deriving each year from new business that is IRA rollover business, because the rule is going to change the way that business is done. There's going to be significantly more paperwork and analysis that has to happen to transact a IRA rollover in the future. You're going to have to provide documentation about alternatives to the rollover, account fees and expenses of the plan versus where the money is being rolled to. You're going to have to describe the different levels of services and investments under each of those options. And that means if this is a significant part of your business, you may want to start focusing in on a few different companies, some select companies that you become real experts on their particular plan. So you already know the costs of that retirement plan the money is being rolled out of to make those comparisons the rule will require you to make. If you're just taking a rollover from here or from there, it is going to be possible to do those rollovers. It'll just be a lot more administrative work to affect those transactions. Step 3 is to update your service matrix. Often with advisors, the services they offer are structured like an iceberg, like you see on the screen, with the asset management and the fees charged for asset management above the water and very visible. But all this other great value and support is below the water. Things like financial planning and behavioral coaching and manager due diligence, portfolio rebalancing, continuing education, all that's kind of below the water. Well, in this new world, we need to bring that all above the water. We need to make all that unseen seen. We need to make all the intangible tangible. So you need to get a list of all the services you offer, and you want to list those by how the client is paying for them. So you may want to divide an asset management fee and say, well, actually, there's two parts to my asset management fee. One part is paying for true asset management, asset allocation, investment selection, manager due diligence, manager monitoring. The other is for planning, for comprehensive financial planning, estate planning, income distribution planning, retirement planning, college planning. All those things are covered under other parts of the fee. But you want to make sure that you're listing off all those services in a way the client sees it and is constantly reminded about it. One way to demonstrate all the services that you offer is to provide a tiered service matrix. This is basically tiered service levels that the client can choose to elect or can qualify to elect based on the amount of assets that they have for you to work with. In this example on the screen, we've simply put those out by 4 segments, A, B, C, and D. You wouldn't want to call them segments. You'll put some nice marketing branding about that. So each segment has a set of services that you would offer the client, such as the number of meetings they would get a year, or the type of financial planning services offered, the type of client education support that's offered. Perhaps technology is part of that, access to account aggregation or other types of software that would be beneficial to the client. That's attached to some assets under administration minimum that allows the client to be really at that service level. And that goes to the pricing as well, that each different service level may have a different pricing proposition around an asset management fee, an advice fee, and or a planning fee. The next slide actually shows you an example of that, a type of service matrix. In this particular matrix, it shows some of the core investment management options. In the next column, there are additional financial planning services the client can pay for. And finally, in the final column is a whole comprehensive wealth management approach that a client may decide to pay for. Step 4 is to really make your business model adjustments. So that's determining those services we talked about just a moment ago. It's adjusting your pricing accordingly and making sure that that pricing is very transparent to the client, that they know exactly what they're paying, but more importantly, what they're paying for. Again, that emphasis on the value. That you implement a plan to consistently deliver all of those services that are listed in your service matrix. That you determine which clients will be best served by a fee-based relationship versus a commission-based relationship. And if you need to make migration between those two platforms, you have a plan to do that and communicate that to your client. And to develop systems to, again, gather that additional client data and meticulously document those recommendations. Step 5 is about creating your fiduciary positioning statement, which is basically the way you're going to describe your fiduciary role to your clients. Your role as a fiduciary is to demonstrate care, skill, prudence, and diligence. So you may want to say to clients, I have always and I will continue to put your best interest first. I'll disclose to you any conflicts of interest I might have, and I will select the best product to help you achieve your goals, regardless of how that product choice affects any compensation I receive. You want to make sure you have your strong positioning statement in place before this rule goes into effect, and you'll want to have it in place too as clients learn more about this rule during the implementation period. Once you have your service matrix, your pricing adjusted, your positioning statement determined, you'll want to update all your client-facing materials, such as that elevator speech that you give to someone you meet, your branded planning process, your service matrix, fee schedule, all your marketing materials, such as your website, your brochures, and your social media content. Now, we gave you those 6 steps. You have time to implement them. Don't feel that you have to do this all today. You have time to think and make really purposeful decisions around how to adjust your business model for the post-fiduciary rule world. So between now and third quarter 2016, make sure you have a really good understanding of all the components of the rule, do that whole book analysis. Towards the end of the year, you'll want to start constructing that service matrix and really getting a good idea of how to do your pricing purposefully. By the first quarter of next year, you'll want to be preparing your fiduciary positioning statement and updating your client-facing materials. Compliance for the new fiduciary rule is required starting in April 2017. The BICE and full compliance is required by January 1st, 2018. So you have time to act before the rule goes into effect, but you don't have time to procrastinate. You want to get started on that thoughtful analysis of your business now. And keep in mind, media reports have said that the Securities and Exchange Commission is working on its own fiduciary proposal, which will likely cover both qualified and non-qualified assets. Your broker-dealer is here to help you. They're going to provide education and training about the rule and how the rule impacts you. They're going to have the BICE contract, and it'll be built in that new account opening process. They'll handle that no response notification to your existing client base. They'll prepare the disclosure websites and give you guidance on any changes you need to make to your website. They'll be providing practice analysis reports, guidance. They'll be giving you opportunities to get certification in behavioral advice, and we're providing coaching on how to, again, adapt and be really successful in a post-fiduciary rule world. So, in conclusion, a few takeaways. You must define your future business model and answer these questions as succinctly as possible. This is what I do for you. This is why I do what I do for you. This is why I charge you for what I do for you. And this is how I deliver what I do for you. And start moving to that practice of the future. Describe your value in the future, largely based around behavioral advice and coaching. How you will describe your services in the future, making the unseen seen, making the intangible tangible. How you will price your services in the future, making that pricing reasonable and transparent. How you will determine your client's best interest by conducting extensive client discovery. And what technology solutions will I need to put in place to provide consistent service to all my clients in the future? That allows you to document the basis for recommendations and services provided, and also communicate and support your clients effectively. Thank you for joining me for this presentation of Rethinking Your Value, Pricing, and Service in a Post-DOL Fiduciary Rule World. This is the first of many such practice management-based training programs on the fiduciary rule that'll be coming your way from the Ladenburg Thalmann Practice Management Group.